Alright guys, welcome to part 18 of Project E55 ASL, and the long-awaited parts have finally arrived, the AEM Ignition Coil Drivers, and you probably know what that means. It's time to install these parts on with the wiring of the car. Hope that the engine runs fine on them, and if everything works in this video, then there's a bit of finishing up to do, loading up a base map and a few other things. But after that, it's finally time to take this car out for a test drive, and I can't even wait for that. I've waited so long for this day, I don't even know what to say. Let's just get right to work and hope everything goes according to plan for this one. Just a brief introduction to the project for those of you that are just joining in. So this was a project that started sometime around this time last year, and it's a project that did not even start with an engine. It literally started with just an engine block, and the whole engine was built around that block, and then the whole car was built around that engine. So literally everything from the bell housing adapter for the transmission to the chassis to the suspension is all custom made for this car. It's taken me a full year to get to this point, and now the car is finally at the point where it's really close to being drivable. So you can probably understand my excitement at this point. Here's a look at the part that I was waiting for so long. It's an AEM 4-channel coil driver. So this one is the circuit that will replace my circuit, well, two of these actually, and they will hopefully be able to control these ignition coils. I'm really hoping this works. It should work, because the pins on these, at least, they look really heavy duty. Again, there's no specifications on these, so I don't know how much current one of these should be running, but apparently this one works with racing ignition coils, which are even bigger than this one. So yeah, that's why I'm really hoping that this one works. For wiring in the ignition coil drivers, it was easy enough. All I had to do was cut a few wires and then crimp the pins on them and then put them in the connector. The same process that I showed when I was installing the standalone ECU. It was part 16, I believe. Here's a look at the ignition coil drivers after they are wired in, and one thing I have to do is that I have to bolt these drivers onto this aluminum plate so that this whole plate will act as a big heatsink for these drivers then, because this is a pretty good thermal design that this thing at the bottom is like a big heatsink for these coil drivers. That's something that my circuit didn't have. I just had a small heatsinks on that, and that obviously wasn't enough heat sinking because they used to get hot and burn out. So with this one, at least, I'm pretty sure these ones shouldn't heat up and burn out because of this thermal design. But what I have been doing right now is that I was probing the signal out of the ignition coils, just making sure that everything is right and everything is functioning properly, and this is the signal that I'm getting out of it. Just to explain what you're seeing over here, so this is the 12 volts that is usually on this wire when there's no signal coming in from the ECU. And when the ECU wants to fire a spark plug, what it does is that it gives it negative, like it takes it down to ground, because when this wire goes to ground, that means that there's a 12 volt difference across the coil, because the other wire is always at 12 volts. But that 12 volt difference should only stay for like 3 milliseconds or something. 2.5 actually, that's the time on the E55, but I was using 3 milliseconds over here because the way I have it set up, whenever the battery voltage is low, it will take it to 3 seconds. Whenever the battery voltage gets high enough, it will go back down to 2.5, which is what it should be. Anyways, yeah, so it charges up the coil for like 3 seconds, and then when it goes back up to 12 volts, here's where the spark plug fires, and you can see the whole bunch of noise you get over here. This is the noise from the spark plug firing and everything. So this is actually like really high extreme voltage over here, and then it finally will go back down to like 12 volts again. Once everything with the ignition coils was sorted, I fired up the engine and just made a few last minute checks, just making sure that the engine was actually running on all 8 cylinders by turning off one cylinder at a time, and also checking all the other values from all the other sensors, just making sure the air-fuel ratios were right, and yeah, just doing some few last minute checks. Okay, so I've refrained myself from taking the car on a test drive today because it's getting a little late. By the time I'll get done with all these things like wiring, like fixing all these wires so it's not a mess anymore, mounting these ignition coils properly, it's gonna be too late for a test drive then. I'm gonna wait till tomorrow for that, but for now I want to fix up all of this. I do want to mount these ignition coil drivers properly though, because they are getting hot, and obviously they would get hot. They're driving so many ignition coils, and really big ones too. So yeah, but I believe after these are mounted properly, this should be enough heat sinking so that they don't burn out like my last circuit did. Other than that, some other things that I need to fix up on. I'm going to be checking the bolts, the torques one more time before I head out. And oh, actually this is the battery mount that I didn't get to complete in the last video, and the crumple zone. So yeah, the battery's mounted over here just like it usually is mounted in Hondas and stuff, with this bracket at the top. This is actually a battery from a Honda, that's why I've actually mounted it this way. Later I might move to a dry battery, but even this one's actually light enough, it doesn't weigh that much at all. So yeah, also talking about the crumple zone. The crumple zone is, this is what it's going to be, but other than that, there's going to be a few more braces that are going to go in here, and the rear wing actually needs to mount on it. That's why I'm not going to paint it for now, because there's a bit more welding that needs to be done on it, and also an air compressor that needs to go right here. That's probably going to be coming in the next video, because there's a bunch of stuff on the car that needs to be controlled using air pressure. So after that, I spent a few hours just cleaning up all the wiring and doing some other last minute things, and here's how I bled the air out of the cooling system. Just lift the car up and give it a few shakes, and yeah, it's just hilarious to see how light this car is. After that, the next day I started the engine again, and I was going through the tune, just trying to dial in the ignition timing and the air-fuel ratios, just trying to make everything as right as possible for now, but later obviously I will also need to properly tune the car on a dyno, hopefully. Okay, it's the next day, and I've spent a bit of time tuning up a base map, just getting the values right, and I was actually surprised to see how much ignition you need to add on this engine. I guess now because the compression ratio is low, but I went up to 40 at some parts of the map, but I didn't have the balls to go above 40, but I think realistically the engine needs even more. It needs 45 or probably even close to 50 degrees of ignition timing on the low load levels of the map, obviously not on the higher load levels. I can't put the engine under load right now because I don't have a dyno over here or something, so the only way I was doing it was pressing on the brakes and putting it gear, and then trying to give it a bit of gas to put some load on the engine. But again, I can't take it even close to full power because the brakes aren't strong enough to hold the engine at a specific RPM. But I had the engine running for I think 20 minutes or something now when I was tuning it and stuff, and yeah, everything looks normal. I had to turn the engine off afterwards because there's no radiator fan, and the temperatures were getting a little towards the hot side. They were getting 95. The thermostat did open, and the radiator is now pretty warm. The thermostat opens at 90 degrees on these cars, and yeah, that is exactly where it opened. And yeah, I'm just gonna let the car cool down right now. For the base map, I think this map should be good to go because I also had the older values from my E55, so I roughly knew what type of values the engine was running at. But I believe this engine, this new setup will need more ignition timing because now with the lower compression ratio, it only has a compression ratio of 8.5 to 1. That's a really low compression, so that's why it's going to need a bit more timing to make the proper power. But for now, I've just kept the numbers really safe. Oh, showing you guys what I've done with these ignition drivers. So I didn't end up mounting them on the same plate as that one because the wires are right in the way. It would have been a really difficult thing to do, but I made a separate plate for it, and I'm just going to bolt this plate to the chassis over here. So yeah, that's the way that's going to work. Other than that, I've tried to tidy up the wires. It's quite a lot better than it was before, but still there's a lot of wires. It's a lot of headache to deal with. So I've lowered the car on the ground now, torqued up all the wheels and everything, and just look at this thing. Now that it's on the ground, it gives you a completely different perspective of the car. Just look at how low this thing is and how big it is, like how long and wide it is, but extremely low at the same time. Right now I've put my SL on charge because the battery died. It was standing here for a while, so right when that charges, I'm gonna clear up my driveway. I'm gonna do a few launches on the driveway first, just make sure that the clutch is fine, the brakes are fine most importantly, and if I feel comfortable, then I might take the car on the block. But if not, I have a trailer right here, so I'll just load the car on the trailer, find an empty parking lot or something, and test the car out over there, because that will give me a better place to test it. But either way, this is actually going to be the first time you guys are going to see this car out in daylight. This whole time it's just been inside this tiny garage, and now it's gonna finally be leaving for the first time, hopefully not the last time. Yeah, I'm really excited. I can't even wait for this. For taking the car out of the garage, I just used a floor jack at the back to actually drag the car out of the garage, because this was a really tight space and I didn't want to risk driving the car because I had no experience driving the car at this point. So the last thing I wanted was to back it up into my own trailer and damage both the car and the trailer. But once the car was finally on the driveway, it was finally time to step inside the car, do a few last minute checks, and yeah, then fire the car up and actually try to drive it. After practicing to drive the car on the driveway for a few minutes, I finally gained enough confidence to try to take the car around the block. And yeah, this is probably going to be the first and the last time you guys will probably ever get to see this car being driven around the street. This car is way too fast to risk it taking it on the streets, but yeah, I'm just going to let you guys watch this drive. This was the first time this car was ever driven anywhere, really. So after having the drive of my life for about 10 minutes, I decided it was a good time to bring the car back in before I get carried away and crash it or something. For bringing the car back into the garage, I decided to actually drive the car in this time rather than bringing it in on a jack or something, but this was actually a really difficult challenge, driving this car into this tiny space, because his car definitely doesn't want to go slow. I'll actually just let you guys watch my struggle. Okay, I just came back from the first test drive of this car, and holy crap, what can I even say? It's a complete monster. Well, I'll just describe the feeling. When I made my first car, it was a 200 horsepower car. It had a Honda engine in it and weighed about 500 kilograms. So I was fine with driving that car. Like, it was fast, but I could still drive it. But other people, when they used to get inside it, as soon as the car used to launch, they used to freak out and get out of it. They were like, oh no, this is way too fast for me. I can't drive this. And I'm having the same feeling in this car. I launched this car and I'm like, oh no, this car is way too fast for me. It's first gear is literally impossible. I cannot drive it in first gear. Literally the smallest touch of the accelerator and the rear wheels just start slipping. Second gear is when things are a bit more reasonable. And to be honest with you, around the streets I didn't want to go any higher than second gear because I didn't want to drive fast. There's people walking around and stuff. It's it's just not safe really. But yeah, dude, the car is just extremely powerful. Even in second gear, you just give it a bit of gas and the rear wheels just start slipping immediately. It's I was trying to get it on boost, like trying to spool up the turbos, but there's no way that was gonna happen. There were a few points actually where the boost needle, I just saw it like creep up just a little bit, but the wheel spin was so much that I had to lift off at that point. But yeah, this car is just, it's amazing. Talking about a few problems that I realized during the test drive. One problem was that the power steering is not working, and I have no idea why. Actually, I think I probably know why it is. I might have mixed up the power steering lines because I had no idea. Like, this is a Mazda Miata power steering rack. If any of you guys know which one's the return line and which one's the pressure line on one of these racks, definitely let me know in the comments, because that could be one thing that I've mixed up. I could have mixed up the pressure line and the return line, and that could be the reason why the power steering isn't working. Other than that, yeah, the brakes, also no power brakes. That's the thing that I will need a bit of getting used to, because you really need to step on the brake pedal to lock these tires. They do lock when you step on it like a bit more, but it's just I guess I'm not used to non-power brakes, so that's something that I'll need to get used to. The thing I don't like about this pedal box though is that the brake pedal is pretty deep, so I need to press it down quite a lot before the brakes actually lock up. That's what I don't like about it. So it's ideally in race cars the pedal shouldn't be too deep. It should be really shallow, so you can immediately press the brakes and immediately go on the accelerator. But I think once I get this car on the track, once the car has downforce, then the car should be easier to drive, and it should be controllable, I think. Because right now the thing is that it's like driving a Formula 1 car without a front wing and a rear wing. If you've ever seen one of those races where a Formula 1 car loses the rear wing, it barely makes it back to the pit without a rear wing, because it's not even meant to work without downforce. So that's really what this car is going through right now. It's like trying to drive a Formula 1 car around a go-kart track pretty much. So yeah, once it's on a bigger track, once it has downforce, I'm pretty sure things are going to calm down, and once these tires are up to temperature. But yeah, I will definitely need a lot of practice in this car to get the most out of it, because it's quick. Everything happens really quickly in this car. It changes direction really quickly. It accelerates and brakes really quickly. Everything just happens immediately. But yeah, that was the whole point of making this car. Now I just gotta learn how to drive it. One more announcement for this video actually. I just made a new Patreon account for this project, because the next part of the project is going to get a little more expensive. It's the carbon fiber body panels, and it's going to be something like this actually. This is going to be what the bodywork is going to be made of. It's 2 layers of carbon fiber on both sides with a foam core in the middle. This is the same type of construction you'll see on all race cars, like Formula 1 cars. Pretty much any racing car that uses carbon fiber, they're going to use something like this, and the benefit is that it's extremely lightweight and it's still extremely strong. And yeah, that's why this is the last part of the project. The car is going really well so far, and I don't want to cheap out on this last part and add a whole lot of weight. That's why I really want to stick to carbon fiber body panels. Unfortunately, the problem is that they're also really expensive. So if you guys want to help me out with the project, that would definitely be a big help at this point. For the names of all the Patreon members, I'm thinking that once the body work is done, there's going to be a big side skirt over here, like a part of the floor that's going to be coming out till here. So my plan is that I'm going to put the names of all the Patreon members over here. So yeah, this is going to be everything for this video. The next video coming up though is going to be an extremely cool one, because I'm planning to convert this manual transmission to an automated manual transmission. So I'm going to have pedal shifters behind the steering wheel that I'm going to press, and the car is going to do the clutch, the rev matching, and the gear shifting for me. Because in a car like this, I already have a lot to learn as a driver, so gear shifting is the last thing I want to worry about. It's actually a system that I tried 7 years ago on the first car that I made, but obviously now working on it 7 years later, the plan is to try to improve it by a lot, to try to get it to shift a lot faster than I'll be able to shift it, hopefully. But yeah, anyways, that's definitely going to be a really cool system. Definitely try to stay tuned for that one. Other than that, yeah, this is everything for this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.